And welcome back to the Player Experience stream for Game 3. I'm Richard Polscam, and I am going to be joined by FLICKR and, of course, Stress. How is it going, guys?
Going good.
I have hiccups.
I noticed just as we went live, I was
Sorry.
like, started giggling. Hopefully that will subside as the games go on. But we're here to break down the ADC carry matchup between FORG1VEN and Deft as we get into this one. So the last time these two teams met, things didn't really go that well for H2K and their bottom lane specifically. We're just going to see a small clip of what went wrong at level 1.
He face-checked at level 1, and it pretty much gave the free lane over to Deft and Mako. In fact, he's burned both of his summoners there, and so this is immediately after in this time lapse stops. Deft just flashes forward, hits him with the crit, and Vander immediately dies.
You heard it there. You didn't even need to see it at that point. That was a horrible start. And you heard the H2K in the rollout at the end of the last game. Jankos kind of giving Vander a little bit of a tease there. Don't face check on stage. You can see, though, the actual AD carry matchup itself is what we're looking at. And, you know, when you look at these two sets of stats, they couldn't really be too much more different across different things. Like, FORG1VEN having a lot lower damage percent when it comes to what Deft's bringing.
Oh yeah, but on that same train, you are correct that they're different now, but they used to be actually really close. FORG1VEN for the first portion of this tournament actually had like 22 CS at 10 minutes, so it's only recently that its stats have really taken a dive individually across from both these two legendary AD carries.
Coming into this matchup, we just saw H2K, of course, come off a win, which is obviously, hooray, Europe. We finally got a win on the board there. How do you think this matchup is going to go between these two players then, now that we've seen like a week of play under their belts?
I have a couple of bets that Vander's not going to face check a brush anymore, which is unfortunate because this is such a hype matchup. You know, you have Deft, the best performing AD carry in the LPL, a region stacked with that talent, and then you have FORG1VEN, often thought as, you know, kind of the premier Western AD carry for a long time until, you know, Sven and Mithy and now Doublelift really showing up to their career highs. So hopefully we actually get standard 2v2 no level 1 shenanigans, because I'm really curious to see if Deft and Mako's aggression will be able to stand toe-to-toe with FORG1VEN's mechanical brilliance.
And I think one of the most interesting things when you look at the comparison between these two AD carries is I think FORG1VEN still has the ability to get the edge in the lane, just in the 2v2 setup. But in general, Deft's impact has been at all points in the game. Even in their losses, Deft was the one that was ahead in lane with Mako. We've seen the Jhin out of Deft in the earlier game that EDG played today, where he's involved in team fights, he's putting damage out. He's just consistent through all parts of the game, whereas FORG1VEN last week was struggling. We saw it in the last game that FORG1VEN did have impact in team fights, so maybe it will be a change-up today.
Do you think, regardless of how the laning phase goes, that Deft will outperform FORG1VEN for the rest of the game? Because we're just talking about how FORG1VEN is more of a lane-dominant player.
It's actually really hard to predict that. If you think back to H2K, one of their most recent losses, I believe FORG1VEN was on Ezreal, and he actually did more damage than the entire enemy team, as well as the most damage on his team. So even when H2K were performing poorly, FORG1VEN was still stepping up and doing those FORG1VEN things that we expect. But obviously, Stress, you guys have more familiarity with him.
I think the interesting thing is outperforming is such a subjective word because Deft and EDG play the same way whether they're ahead or behind. They're always going to take it to you, whereas FORG1VEN is a player that if he's ahead, he's taking it to you, but if they're behind, if H2K are behind, he drops back. He doesn't actually put himself out there too much. We've seen a couple of times where he flashes forward to try and even up a fight, but generally will play a little bit more defensive than we've seen out of a lot of other AD carries. So outperforming is kind of a very subjective, depending on what you're looking for from a team.
Well, we're about to get into the champion selects. H2K and EDG here. Tam Kench will be aimed at the bot lane for Mako, taking that one off the board as well for Vander. And Syndra and Jhin, there's the Jhin ban.
I love this pick and ban phase out of H2K, at least from the first two bans, because we saw the Jhin, we saw the Tam Kench, we talked about it earlier, how impactful Mako was on that Tam Kench and how much it opened up for Deft. We still haven't even seen H2K bring out Jhin at all, so another pick that they tend to favor away from.
Which is why I'm curious if EDG are going to try to target that AD carry pool at all, or leave everything open and just try to find the favorable 2v2 matchup, maybe giving away FORG1VEN's Caitlyn as an example.
And of course, we are focused on the AD carries, and a couple of support bans will affect that pool as well. Potential now to drift towards the range supports. Alistair gone, Tam Kench gone, Braum is still there.
Braum as well as Trundle are still available. LPL isn't super well known for their Trundle top or using it as a flex pick. It's almost exclusively used as a support pick, and it was played all throughout the regular season. There was never really a trough where Trundle support fell away.
So possibility for that pick as we finish up the bans here. EDG using all the time actually to wait for their final ban, and it will be Olaf aimed at the jungle now.
Elise surely has to be Yanko's first pick here. The Syndra is not available to first pick. H2K could flex the Karma, but if we are still looking at melee supports, Vander has played a lot of Taric in the playoffs. Haven't seen too much Taric. He was right yesterday, obviously, out of Albus Nox. But H2K, a lot of options. Only one AD carry off the board. Sivir, if they want it for Forgiven, is a potential first pick for an AD carry.
And I like that you bring up Taric because although he was played globally in North America, Europe, as well as especially Korea, he was never played in the LPL. We only saw him in the LPL playoffs, and it was only by one support player. So it is a very fringe pick for them.
Saw it from FLICKR as well the other day, and that was a fun performance. H2K now just waiting on their first pick coming out from them. Where in the rotation are we expecting the supports to come out? Like, we just had a Karma lock-in, so that can of course now be a flex.
For EDG at this point, I think it's likely to be the two they're hovering over here. I don't think support really fits this role because, as you said, if they are going Trundle, it's not a flex for EDG. So as they lock in a very different champion, we had this discussion about how ClearLove does not play Elise.
I mean, naturally ClearLove can play Elise.
Sure, of course.
But it's a question of should he play Elise? Like, what is ClearLove's effective champion pool? Effective champion pool is kind of the language that I like to use around it. Elise really hasn't been in his wheelhouse. He's much more of kind of control jungler. If he does like to play that carry style, it's much more about his Evelynn, about his Graves, rather than a champion like Elise.
At this point, though, it leads me to H2K look towards the Lee Sin, potentially the Rumble for Odoamne. Into the Poppy, it is a matchup that can be won. The other champion we just saw Odoamne on is the Jace, and Poppy's the matchup that's being played into that, so I doubt they're going to go that route on things. The Trundle is another one. If they wanted to double flex plus pick up the Lee Sin, there's a lot of emphasis. Obviously, we are the bot lane focus stream for Forgiven. He loves early picking Lucian and Caitlyn, so that's another option if they want it.
Well, there you go. It's already hovering that Caitlyn. I kind of feel like even though the Karma is a flex pick, I almost feel like it's almost always going to be going down into that support position because I feel like it's really important for H2K. Wow, I wish I could speak today. H2K, Forgiven, and Vander to have the stronger 2v2 matchup. And I feel like since there's so many support bans, you then grab the Karma, you're then limiting that pool even farther. Mako's options are pretty much Braum or Bard. Bard if he wants to try to compete in that 2v2. Do
you think that's likely for that bot lane of EDG now that they've seen the Karma and the Caitlyn locked in, that they will try and compete? Well, there's a Nami and there's an Ezreal.
Yeah, now we have our answer. It's a very self-sufficient bot lane. A lot of the damage can't stick to you because you do have the Nami sustain. If for whatever reason Mako decides he wants to roam out of the lane or things start going poorly for Deft and Mako, you can just back up and start farming with that Mystic Shot. So a very self-sufficient, very cautious, very absorbing bottom lane from EDG.
And there is the potential now for H2K to pivot with that Karma. Put it into the mid lane, try and avoid the Nami into Karma. The other option is they take the Karma in the support role and just say, okay, well, we'll sit back. We'll farm this lane out. Nobody's going to go too aggressive and look for, more power to come out from a mid laner. We've still got the likes of Vlad available, but whatever they pick, EDG will have the option to counter it.
What is the result of that then? If H2K are going to put the Karma into the bottom lane and then EDG are essentially looking to absorb, as you put it, Frost, what is the knock-on effect of that going into mid-game? Who's going to transition better?
I mean, it's hard to say. Right now, you would say if it's Karma, Caitlyn, as soon as the Ryze and the Kennen have been locked in, that it's going to be the bot lane in control for H2K. And so now it's kind of a question of what do they do actually with that pressure point? Is it simply just to give get Forgiven ahead, make sure that he has that CS lead and so he can transition into kind of mid-game Caitlyn safely? Or are they going to use that pressure point to say, okay, ClearLove's going to be down here anyway. We have a very strong 2v2 bot lane, also a very safe 2v2 bot lane. We're going to absorb all of that 3 versus 2 pressure from EDG and then make plays elsewhere on the map. Because Jankos is on such a flexible jungler like Rek'Sai, there's actually a lot of pivot points and a lot of threatening points for H2K. I don't necessarily think maybe the mid lane, but he can really either invade ClearLove, try to disrupt him. He can go bottom and try to make the most out of Karma and Caitlyn having the creep wave shove and the advantage there, or he can just camp the top lane, which we've seen be super effective as the INTZ versus EDG game, because Rek'Sai, Kennen versus Elise Poppy, there's a lot of kill threat either way.
Sure.
More often than not, as you're alluding to, H2K, they're going to be shoving out in that bottom lane, so the option for ClearLove to come bot is always going to be there. Never really does Forgiven and Vander go, okay, well, we'll play under our turret.
There's something something very interesting about EDG's mentality, though. EDG were one of the teams back when Twitch kind of appeared as the counter to Lucian, and if you asked EDG, why do you pick Twitch as the counter to Lucian, they would literally say, because Twitch loses the lane. The mentality was that because Twitch lost the lane against Lucian, that the enemy jungler would come to try to kill the Twitch, and ClearLove would sit and wait for the enemy jungler to show up, knowing that they picked a weak side of the map to 3v3 it. That was literally their logic behind it, so EDG are very familiar with playing around a losing point of the map, especially that bottom side.
Wow, that's really interesting. Do you think they'll do something similar in this game now that we do have that lock-in of the Caitlyn karma?
I mean, they certainly have their options because they have the Elise. The big question mark for me is, what does ClearLove actually look like on that champion, and is it enough to get around Forgiven's Caitlyn of all picks?
Yeah, I think you can really go ham. We've seen good performances from Forgiven, of course, coming into the tournament. Now they're coming off a win as well. So I'm feeling good about H2K currently. But either way, don't forget to check in with us on Twitter, rather, and fire off your AD carry questions using the hashtag AskTheCasters, and we will provide some answers live on air. And we are getting into game, H2K and EDG.
So, Forgiven versus Deft. Round 2, this time Forgiven. Let's hope Vander doesn't give away the matchup straight away.
Yeah, I think he's self-aware now that we had, like, he memed himself in the end of that rollout, so I think we're good.
So, something that's really cool about the bottom lane that the other lanes don't really get to play around is the fact that there's 2 people in it. But instead of the lane being cut, excuse me, I'm always going to mess this up, horizontally, it's actually cut vertically, in a sense that in the bottom lane, you effectively have 2 smaller lanes, so you can actually really adjust your matchup. Like, even if you have a winning 2v2 matchup, you can lose if your support or your AD carry play on the wrong side of the lane in the matchup, if that makes sense. Pulse, you're looking at me like, trying to follow.
I'm kind of there. So explain it in terms of this matchup.
So it's in the same mentality of like when Bard wants to stand, depending on what color side he's on, so he can make sure that he has that inside track towards the wall to find the stuns. For this one, because Caitlyn can both outrange Nami and Ezreal, although the Mystic Shot it's a little bit different, they have a lot more power on which side that they can stand. But for me, I want Vander to be standing on the side of Ezreal. And I want Caitlyn just to start chunking out that Nami, and I want Vander to try to use his shield to absorb a lot of the pressure from Ezreal and to fight back with a lot of that poke.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Now I can see the chessboard.
Versus like Caitlyn standing on the side of Ezreal.
Okay.
I'm envisioning some kind of like tennis doubles match here. Although my tennis knowledge is way lower.
It used to be really predominant when Annie was kind of a support in the bot lane. When she had that really long auto attack range, you would constantly see the Annie support kind of mirror the AD carry as opposed to standing on the support side, simply because she would outrange someone like Graves, like Sivir way back when. But it's just something to kind of pay attention to, and you can kind of see them. They're standing on different sides. You see Vander as he's trying to match and stand on Ezreal's side, as well as use that cannon creep to block any of the incoming skill shots.
A lot of people will look at that trade that just happened and go, okay, well now obviously Vander dropping very low from that, but you can see Forgiven is basically untouched from that, trading the health bars off both people. Obviously Nami will have the sustain advantage in this lane, but
sure.
Yeah, Forgiven is trying to just hit that level 2, and you can see he's drawing minions as far back as possible to keep as safe as he can. There's the level 2 for him that gives him access normally to trap at level 2. Not the most amount of crowd control to land for Vander to double up on that trap.
He definitely took the, sorry, we just checked. Stress couldn't see before which one he had taken, but he took net level 2.
This is such a Forgiven thing, though. Like, back when it was just like, yeah, trap all the time, we would always see him max E anyway on Caitlyn. That's just the type of player he is. Something just went down in the mid lane. Both mid lanes just died.
Ryu and Scout just traded 1-for-1 in that mid lane.
Judging from the crime scene...
Is Mouse about to die?
I think he got hit by the tower. Oda1 is just going to kill Mouse. Okay.
Okay. Well, we chose the bot lane in this because we thought it would be the influential matchup. This is a farming lane, and no one really is going to do anything in the 2v2. Here comes ClearLove, though.
There's ClearLove coming down. The 3v2 now. Oh, nice flash over the Cocoon as well. Forgiven just going to wander back to the tower.
And this also explains why Forgiven takes the confidence of having net level 2 as opposed to the trap level 2. He knew he's going to be pushed up in that matchup. He knows that ClearLove wants to camp the bottom lane, so he didn't necessarily use it in that last exchange, but having that extra safety to create more distance by taking net level 2 versus the trap.
One of the reasons why he flashed instead of netted, a lot of people look at that. The net on Caitlyn is a fairly unreliable escape tool. It's fairly slow and fairly short distance as well. So if you know you can avoid it with the flash and aren't too sure about the net, that's why Forgiven will trade that spell away.
It's not like a Tristana jump or a Ezreal E where it's just like, oh, I thought I hit him, but no, he's away from me anyway. It's just like sometimes you'll just get caught in it.
And because it's a dash rather than a blink, like the Ezreal, if you get hit by the crowd control, you stop in the middle. Whereas Ezreal, you'll just stop the other side when you get there. So
yeah, everyone knows the feel of grabbing grabbing an Ezreal as Blitzcrank. And it's like, oh, he got away from me anyway. Okay.
Gosh darn it. That's exactly what the Blitzcrank says.
Yeah, that's what everyone says in solo queue. Gosh darn it.
Gosh darn it.
those exact words.
Yeah. Pretty much. So right now, Forgiven escaped from that gank. Now he's back into lane. He's pretty significantly down the CS now, though.
So what he's doing, and the mistake that Deft made, anytime you have an AD carry with the skill shots, you're looking at Caitlyn, you're looking at Ezreal, you're looking at Sivir, especially skill shots that go through creep wave, so particularly the Caitlyn and the Sivir. Anytime the enemy AD carry is up against a wall, the pros are automatically going to throw that skill shot because it's 100% going to hit. So it's really advantageous for blue side Caitlyn to start funneling Ezreal, or excuse me, Deft up into that tiny little corridor underneath his tower, because it's going to make it easier to hit those Piltover Peacemakers. Wow, I had to really dig deep on that ability.
You got the play-by-play knowledge in there as well. No knowledge of the skill names. Got it.
Pulse has got all of them down. I don't have to focus on that, thankfully.
Yeah, you know the numbers, I just know the names. That's how the split works on color and play-by-play. Vander, right here, just controlling the bushes as well. Is this a standard thing coming out from Caitlyn? He's generally putting the traps in the bushes rather than like walling off the opposing laners?
Yeah, so the reason for this is if Mako wants to throw a bubble out of the bush, it gives him slightly less range to do so. It's slightly more readable. It's just another way of getting bush control when you don't have a lot of wards. Most top players are never going to step on that trap. It's not going to become a factor ever. It's just a way of, taking control of a slight amount of territory in the lane.
It's deterrent, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Deft just
completely
pinned in place. Forgiven won't get the kill, but that was a good chain of CC there from HGK.
And we talked about how there's not a whole lot of crowd control. Like, if that chain locks, of course, there is the follow-up, but Deft stepping a little too close.
And it's also the idea of having Karma play on Ezreal's side, being able to leash the CC on the guy that you actually want to kill, absorbing his damage with your shield, and then turning around and throwing at the poke. So really well chained from Vander Forgiven. And this is what we wanted to see, no big mistakes level 1 to kind of skew this matchup, just that straight 2v2, although the champion priority from both these teams is skewing it in Forgiven's favor.
Oh, great net combo off the trap, and you can see already using 2 traps forward, but Deft doesn't have the mana to come forward and actually punish Forgiven for getting hit by that bubble, so really key point in that matchup where Deft couldn't actually punish on the crowd control.
This is actually something really different. Before, against INTZ, EDG actually died in this exact same scenario. I believe that they were running the Ezreal Nami, and they just thought that the damage wouldn't stick. Macau was playing the Ashe, and they just got dove. We did actually see that Yankos a couple of seconds ago was on the bottom side of the map. There's tons of H2K vision down there, but you've already seen that EDG have learned from their mistakes. We're low. Yes, we have some mana that we can try to, farm out this lane, but let's just give away the CS, try to reset the lane, and make our back. Let's not try to force this one and open ourselves for a dive.
So a little moment maybe to touch on the itemization here as we come out. Sheen first out of Deft, focusing on damage rather than the tier. Depending on how your back goes, what you can buy, that kind of dictates whether you want that trading potential out of the Sheen. But what looks to have been a frustrating back for Forgiven, as we are looking on the top side. Normally, the perfect back for Caitlyn is BF Sword into the Hurricane, into Boots, into Infinity Edge. Those mouse dies in the top side, but Forgiven already having to go level 2 Boots early on, so a bit of a rough one.
Does offer him a lot more safety and security, though, from like dodging out of the skill shots, as well as the Nami bubble or the CC. So for a player like Forgiven, who is so strong mechanically, yeah, it's not the best, but obviously the 35% attack speed or the buff that those boots got quite a few patches ago still puts him in a pretty good spot with the movement speed to mitigate damage simply by dodging it.
As an ADC, when do you want to start picking up like a call? Because we just saw obviously Forgiven pick it up now.
Well, Forgiven actually picked this up on the first back after he had to use his flash. So he's already got like 39 minions out of this.
Like that, yeah, he's 60.
The reason he got it is just because he had a couple of waves worth of minions, and he couldn't afford a Doran's likely, and just said, okay, well, I'll just buy this. I'll just get the payoff from it, because I think it's like 180 gold that you lose, that you gain essentially from getting it. So FORG1VEN just wanting to stack up a little bit, just a security thing.
Makes sense. Scout getting caught in the mid lane as well. Has to burn both of the summoners.
People forget, you know, as Rise it starts to skyrocket in popularity, I'm kind of unsure of where he really fits in the scheme of things in terms of the mid lane matchups. I thought he was going to be much more prevalent coming into this Worlds, but obviously if Syndra's taken off the table, he's pretty good. But as someone who has a lockdown hard CC like that, just gets to walk right up you, root you, it also helps the ecosystem in which Rek'Sai is a powerful pick, simply because of all of her reach on the mid lane, due to her angles of tunnels coming in. So the more Rise that we start to see climb into this tournament, I think that inherently makes Rek'Sai stronger and kind of rise up on the tier list of junglers.
So I want to touch back on the bot lane of EDG, because we were talking in Champion Select and Frosky was saying like they were picking this as very much like absorbing the bot lane of H2K. Pharmacy is pretty much even with a slight advantage to EDG. Are they playing this lane correctly? Is this what you wanted from them?
I mean, frankly, Deft and Make are kind of doing everything that they can. The lane, even though you don't really see it in the CS, I still feel like is being won by Vander and FORG1VEN simply because they're setting the pace and the tempo of the lane by controlling the wave. Although we do see another 3v2 scenario here as Clearlove wanders down.
Yeah, instantly shooting out the tidal wave. I'll open up Clearlove's opportunity to gank, but flashed out of the way, and that should be the end of the aggression there. But still some summoners burn.
But the thing is because FORG1VEN and Vander are absorbing so much pressure, that's the second time they've been ganked by Clearlove now, it again opens up so much more space that Oda knows that he has the 1v1 on Mouse top, and he's already heavily abusing that. So even though Vander and FORG1VEN aren't necessarily acting in the top lane, they are a part of this 82 to 53 CS discrepancy in the top lane because they're absorbing
pressure,
so much attention.
A massive part of that, and keep in mind, like Mouse, as we saw at the very beginning of this game, died 1v1. So Clearlove not being there maybe to offset some of that pressure turns this around. Now Odoamne will go one versus one against him. We'll get the stun though. Should be fine.
Yeah, Kennen does a lot of damage.
That Kennen skin though, every time I see it I'm like, Callista? That's really strange looking.
Yep.
Well, something interesting in this game that FORG1VEN actually, I really was hoping he'd play Caitlyn so that I could talk about this, but then he did it differently to the last game. The very last game we saw, he trap maxed on Caitlyn. First, yeah.
That doesn't seem like a big
No,
thing
it
to
doesn't.
do.
Because in last week's I was like, oh, he's still Q-maxing. This is an old thing. And maybe he's changed up now again. I saw it today. Nope, back to Q-max. This is all about the push, getting that advantage. In the last game, it worked out very well for him trap maxing in the team fights, getting multiple lockdowns, little bits of crowd control, just getting the empowered autos. So this time he's gone back to his old push style, wants to try and punish Deft and Mako in the lane as much as he can.
And there's also something cute when we talk about like Caitlyn's traps. Pay attention to how Caitlyn's will hide their traps. Stixxay is very famous for this. When he's playing red side Caitlyn and he's trying to siege into blue side outer mid, he actually hides his trap behind the structure in between the wall and the tower. And it's really frustrating to play against, especially as like a support. You can even do it in the bottom side, even though Caitlyn's on blue. If where the creep wave is coming in, if you set a trap there, the tower completely blocks it. Do it in solo queue, the enemy
Instant
support will step on it every time, and it's just like free headshot outside of tower range. It's so tilting experience.
It basically works on every tower because there's different sections. One of the most frustrating ones is if you place it on the blue side outer mid. There's just like that area where people are like walking in between the tower and the wall. You just catch them, and it's like a double because you just get all the crowd control as they run away through it. So Caitlyn's very frustrating. Even Reckless, who I had a long conversation with about Caitlyn, he was like, "That's one of the best feelings that ever can be." Is if
catching
you
people
hide
in
them.
that.
Also, it's basically an auto attack reset as well. There's a shorter animation on connecting with a headshot after somebody steps on the trap. So you can auto trap headshot pretty quickly.
So something really important, kind of checking back with itemization, is the fact that Deft has finished his Iceborne Gauntlet. It's a fairly early Iceborne Gauntlet simply because he missed out on all of his boots. He just went straight for that. But why it's so important in this matchup and why he rushed it without grabbing his boots is because he's against a Caitlyn with a Q max who's going to push very heavily. And the thing about Iceborne Gauntlet is it's so important on Ezreal's kit to help him effectively keep up with the pushing power of Caitlyn because it offers him that ability to have that slight AoE chip.
And there's a really different setup here for Deft. In this tournament for Worlds, we've typically been seeing people go tier with the Sheen into Trinity Force with the Manamune as well. We've been seeing a big absence of the Iceborne Gauntlet. And this time Deft is just going straight for it, as you said, to try and get some of that push. Whew, nearly picks up a cross-map kill. But a big departure from what we've seen from the other Ezreals here at Worlds 2016.
Do have a Twitter question coming in from Zoldak, who says, when in a 2 versus 2 lane against a sustained support like Nami, how important is trading versus positioning in lane?
Ooh, so this is an interesting one because while Nami is a sustained support, she heavily punishes you if you step out of position. I mean, trading is fine to get the mana away, but if you step out of position to do so and you get bubbled and then the E goes onto the enemy AD carry, like you just lose the trade straight away.
In that same vein, though, if Nami does use her bubble pretty carelessly, she's also a fairly low mobility support. It's very easy to get on top of her and kill her. Really, 2v2 matchups are so much more about getting the wave push, because if you think about it as like a soft CC, so your auto attack animation, the animation that your champion has to go through to clear the creep wave in front of him, that duration is pretty much like a CC where you don't get to damage the enemy opponent. So it's not so much like a trading of like, how does Karma trade versus Nami? I mean, obviously these are all going to be fairly unique, but the number one thing to take away is get your creep wave as big as possible, shove it into someone, because they're going to spend more time in that soft CC of their auto attack animation, where every time they come up to hit a creep, you get to punch them in the face for free.
And if I remember rightly, that animation actually, either in the previous patch or in it's been spoken about, that animation is being tweaked to be a longer lock-in animation. So there is potential for more punishment. I know I was reading, I believe it was one of the Ask Riots about that. Yeah. It's coming out. That the patch is coming out. The info is out already.
That's one of the interesting things to me, because like I'm a top laner, so when you're talking about bottom lane, it's like all whooshing over my head. So like 2v2 dynamics, I just don't get. But like for top lane, when people are locked in those auto attack animations, that's when you're really looking to trade over creeps. Like when someone's locked in that, then you get the chance to hit them.
Yeah, the number one thing that you should be watching is not necessarily where someone is standing in the lane. I mean, obviously, if you're playing a champion like Ezreal, you want to try to, bend those skill shots, bend it like Beckham around the creep wave. But really, just every time you see one of your creeps go low health, you know that your enemy opponent is going to come up and try to last hit it. That means that you have that slight moment where they want to last hit, where you can just hit them and start, expanding and snowballing that small damage of these tiny last hits here and there. You don't necessarily have to always look for that all-in kill.
And that's one of the things Crepo talks about a lot whenever you speak to him, specifically about matchups with supports like Braum and Bard, is whenever the enemy AD carry steps forward, on Braum you can W and then like auto or Q as soon as you know, and as long as both of you are on the same page going aggressive, that's when you can kind of punish somebody for trying to farm. But Deft and Mako, they're trying to punish here on Vander and Forgiven because they just hit a bunch of skill shots on the way up to it with this Iceborne Gauntlet, which has forced Forgiven back behind the tower. You can see how low mana Forgiven is as well from spamming out those Qs.
And look at already kind of the difference in positioning of the wave right now. The fact that suddenly we're seeing the game and it's always constantly pushed towards H2K. Again, that just goes back to reinforce what the Iceborne Gauntlet means for Deft in this Ezreal versus Caitlyn matchup. Like, the reason why the wave is getting shoved forward is because he rushed that item so he could compete with her wave clear.
Is there anything that Forgiven can do to counteract that? Because right now he's just going for a standard build, getting the BF sword, going into the Hurricane.
Once he gets Hurricane, it kind of naturally does it himself, but this is a conscious choice out of H2K to accept this because they already got Tower First Blood from mid lane with Ryu getting that advantage, and they're just not conceding any kills on the bottom side and said, okay, well, EDG, you can have control of this for now, we're making a play on the top side, so Forgiven doesn't consciously need to do anything except not die with Vander and just farm out the lane for as much as he can.
And that's the big thing, is right now Forgiven's in a point where he wants to complete his Hurricane, he wants to complete his Infinity Edge, and even at that point, although simply because H2K are kind of ahead of the clock right now, and when we use vocabulary like that, what we mean is that if this was just a standard game, and you would expect kind of the ambient gold leads coming into their pockets, that they wouldn't have the items that they have now. So when we say ahead of the clock, it's that they have more gold than is typically usual, they have more power than you would ever expect. it'll give Caitlyn a bit of a ride through her mid-game power trough that we usually like to talk about, simply because she's going to have, they're not going to have the resistances built up that she doesn't need to look for that double attack speed item to get through that steroid or look for an armor penetration item.
Well, 2 people getting caught in the mid lane from H2K. Just want to brush past that one. But in the bot lane,
we'll forget about that.
Yeah, it didn't happen. We didn't see it. FORG1VEN did manage to take the tower in the bottom lane as well as Deft was walking back to lane. So even though EDG took it, there was no first blood towers. You were talking about stress. So it's actually completely evened up.
Yeah, and that was FORG1VEN just noticing there was a window while Mako was out of lane. He knew Deft was still around, and now he can transition over to the mid lane to make sure there's no further capitalization from EDG. But those 2 kills are going to be fairly significant. You can see Clearlove is at 2-0. He's had a fairly big impact on the game, but still, we've got to look at how top lane is going to contrast to all of that, because this is a massive CS difference between the 2. And there's always 2 roles for Kennen. It's either play defensive, ult on the spot, never move away from your AD carry and play the defense role, or you play like Smeb and you go onto the enemy AD carry. But Ryu, he's in trouble.
This does not look like a good situation that anyone would want to be in. The suppress, the bubble, just throw everything at him, and Ryu unfortunately goes down. FORG1VEN happy that he no longer has to reside in this lane.
My favorite part about that was Mouse burning his teleport. He ended up canceling it, but he's like, I want to participate, guys. Kind of really touching quickly on the top lane matchup, because it does mean a lot for how these AD carries have to position and how they have to pay attention in these team fights. We talk about this all the time in the LPL, is that you cannot put a gold value on Poppy's ultimate. So every single statistic, every single item in this game has a gold value associated with it, because obviously they give you stats. Those stats are worth certain things. The beauty about a Poppy ultimate is that even though Mouse is down massive amounts of golds and compared to Kennen or Oda's Kennen, if this super fed Kennen just rocks up into a team fight and he gets punted out by the Poppy ultimate, that Poppy ultimate's worth about 15,000 gold, because that guy's donezo. So while I do agree that, you know, there's 2 different types of Kennen and they really need to pay attention to Oda, simply the fact that EDG have a champion like Poppy can really throw a wrench in a lot of H2K's strengths.
It can, and that is a lot of the reason why Odoamne has gone, oh, okay, I'm going to get Poppy ulted out of a fight sometime.
Zhonya's.
Just pick that up as soon as you see the hammer going, just hit that as it's coming out, and he should be okay. But yeah, Odoamne's flanks could be incredibly difficult to deal with for EDG if they don't control the map well enough. But we saw earlier against INTZ when they were in the lead, EDG very easily held on to their vision control, so no real reason to understate that.
Yeah, so actually I really like Poppy, because I don't need to be skilled at all. I can lose lane like Mouse is right now, but I'll still have massive gold value in a team fight, because I can knock front lines away.
This is what Pulse says every single time we queue up together. He's like, I'm just going to be the Mouse of the team.
Don't worry, guys, I got you in the later stages of the game.
That's better than when we used to queue in here to say, I play Riven.
Yeah, I definitely went for a Riven phase. I think every top laner at some point goes through the Riven phase. It's like the emo phase you go through the teenage years.
It's totally fine. As an AD carry main, there's always a point where everyone's like, I'm going to be an Ezreal main, and I'm going to be the best Ezreal in the world.
And then you watch Uzi play.
He's not even a...
So are you saying Deft's still going through a phase, or is...
Deft is legitimately one of the best Ezreal players in the world. I think Popus50 said it best at the beginning of the tournament. He said the word legendary Ezreals, because Wei Xiao obviously is retired and was also very well known for his Ezreal. But, you know, current players playing the game, all of the best Ezreal players in the world are at this tournament.
Like Uzi.
I'm tilted. Uzi played a phenomenal Ezreal, but he wasn't. It's so funny because he's such a.
This is fantastic.
He's such a different Ezreal. He kind of reminds me of Kid, another former AD carry in the LPL, in that when you watch Uzi play Ezreal, he's like an attack damage Ezreal. It's all about that auto attack and the fact that the kit gives him so much safety and self-sufficiency and its ability to reposition with his arcane shift, versus like one of the like the cleanup crew Ezreals like Deft, who's, you know, he's sniping all those incredible skill shots. His cooldown management is phenomenal. Like Deft is all about cooldown management. He knows exactly what cooldowns you have. He knows exactly what cooldowns he has, and he'll just skirt that line. I know this is Imp and not Deft, but in Samsung White, when they used to run their team fights, Dandy and Mata would count down the enemy's cooldowns. So during a team fight, Dandy would say something like his like Jarvan E-Flash is down for like 9, 8, 7, you know, like count it down. So Imp knew exactly what kind of timing window that he had to play aggressively. Uzi Uzi is not like that. Uzi is incredible at target selection. He will hit the best target at the best time, but that'll also put him in scenarios where he'll like flash forward and immediately die, simply because he's not aware of that.
All Uzi counts is the gold coming in.
I got it, yes. Give it to me. Give all the minions to me. So what type of Ezreal is Deft?
Deft is he's the Wei Xiao. He's the
Wei Xiao.
You know, keeps track of all of his cooldowns. He was very well known on Samsung Blue when he used to play in Korea for his team fighting ability. So it's that ability to kite, it's that ability to sit back and just ride that fine line of, I know you can't do anything for me, so I'm going to go in right now.
I love it when Frost gets fired up. This is amazing.
Yeah,
if you have any questions on Twitter as well that will get Frost fired up, definitely shoot them towards us. But we do have one coming in from Poplars, who says, how come Karma over Morgana, and why did Karma rise in favor? Stress?
For a start, Futurama fan, I like it. Poplars, it's great. So, Karma over Morgana. Morgana is great if you're against single target CC that is like one ability. Black Shield is really good against, these supports that maybe have just one ability, but when you start playing against things like Alistair, that kind of thing, it becomes a lot more difficult. Karma, Flex Pick is great. Poke in lane for lane dominance is great. As I said, just the ability that you can just go, we've lost this draft, push it into the mid lane. The speed up, the snare, the lockdown, just so many things in Karma's kit just make her such a viable pick.
I mean, she's got too much good stuff, is what it comes down to. And again, it has this really cool conversation about kind of League of Legends holistically of, the difference between like viable and like overpowered or like meta. A lot of champions, because we do have so many champions in this game, do overlap in what they can do. So now it's about selecting like who does it the best. And that's kind of where Karma rises to the cream of the crop, because she offers so much, whereas Morgana, she does some things slightly better than Karma, or she's slightly better in kind of these niche scenarios. But the fact that you have to use the word niche is what pushes these champions like Morgana, like Leona, like Soraka down.
And there are very few comps that you wouldn't want to run Karma in. Like, if you're ever looking at a comp and you're like, Karma's the wrong pick to take early in the draft, then something's gone wrong in the rest of your picks and bans. You're building like an old Millennium-style pick comp.
Oh, man,
I do not want to see. Then you could run a Morgana.
That's all they did,
fine. Just anything like Elise, Ari, Morgana, single target. That's all you care about.
Oh, instant flash from Odawame. But that's actually knocked him out of the cocoon from Clearlove.
That moment when those two players are both Chinese and there's no language barrier.
So that one, not the 15,000 gold.
But ultimate,
H2K, they've got the Karma this time. So they've got the Baron.
They do, yeah. There you go. Just draft an Albus real quick, but Mouse now coming. Oh, no, they're gone. Unlucky. Ryu just popping the ultimate there, and that was just a good reaction from H2K, really.
H2K need to quickly get back in position. I'm not going to say they're lucky because they prepped the wave beforehand, but the best thing that H2K did in that scenario, other than taking the Baron, is they had the mid wave pushed up. So the threat is that if they get caught, wait, what's a larger? They like in the alt stream, you can just really break down these points and really go for it. So I'm going to back up. We're going to talk about objective priority.
All right, I'm ready. I feel like I should take a seat for this one.
Okay, this was the cool thing that H2K did, and what made that Baron steal, or not Baron steal, that Baron play not good, but great. When you set up an objective, we always talk about kind of laying down your triangle vision, walking into it, getting vision control, making sure that you either make a pick or you know where everyone is so you can take the objective safely. What few teams don't do, and what we don't really talk about, is the side wave management, and the fact that while they take an objective, they have all of their waves pushing against EDG. And why this is so important is if you think about a dragon fight, if it's a 50-50 dragon fight or a 50-50 Baron fight, you walk in and say you lose the objective, say you don't get the Baron or you don't get the dragon, if all of the waves are pushed, all you lose is the objective. You don't lose anything else because they can't immediately take the Baron and then run towards their wave pushing in and take towers. It's pushing in. They have to reset the map. So what was beautiful from H2K there was not only their vision preparation getting the Baron, but the fact that even though EDG shoved them off and got the inside track on the mid lane, they had already taken care of their waves in mid, top, and bottom, that EDG couldn't do anything. There was no counterplay.
Yeah, no counterplay, and they didn't even get the bot lane play as well. As soon as Clearlove showed up there, it's like, we've lost the Baron.
But we get Cloud Dragon, so...
Nailed it.
Well, H2K got that.
Yeah, H2K got it. But EU does love Cloud Dragons, so...
Not so much. Welcome to the AD carry bot lane focus stream, where one Caitlyn is 0-0-0 and the Ezreal is 0-0-1.
We always choose
it's
the
the
choose
run
the
of
most
farming.
hype matchups and the 0-0-0.
It's been a lot of farming. Generally, Deft has been ahead for 10 CS this entire game, all since getting that Iceborne Gauntlet. And, didn't see that. Definitely didn't miss that.
So I actually just got the stat that Deft has done the most damage in this game with 9,000 damage.
Surprise, surprise.
9,000 damage.
Here's the thing, though. Deft puts up ridiculous numbers in terms of his stats, like his damage share, but you have to always remember it's a damage share.
Yeah.
So it's like based on like what the rest of his team is doing. And unfortunately, when you have a top laner like Mouse who's about to get Flame Horizoned,
You're not even wrong.
it becomes easier to take up that massive damage share for your team. So not taking away from Deft, he's a phenomenal AD carry. He's definitely the primary, he's the cannon for the team. Clear Love, Mako, they like prep him, they set him up, and when he hits you, you go down. But there's also, like, Mouse is like the tripod underneath the cannon.
How stable is that tripod, Frost?
Well, I feel like if you put the same analogy on H2K, FORG1VEN is like a little machine gun, and FORG1VEN's the cannon on top of that. So it's still doing some damage. Mouse is literally a tripod.
The tripod. One of the legs is a bit shaky, sometimes it falls over.
The problem is, like, as we said, this game, without wanting to be too rough on it, it kind of did go from that one versus one, right?
Yeah.
And, like, Deft has got the unenviable task now of being kind of even in a matchup against an AD carry that is going to scale, like, auto attack for auto attack is going to scale harder than Ezreal. Like, Ezreal has the utility, has the poke, has the ability to take the trade if you're smart, but if they just stood there and auto attacking each other on even items, Caitlyn's going to outtrade him.
It's also kind of this difference of it's so much easier to execute, like not taking away from FORG1VEN, but it's so much easier to execute massive damage on Caitlyn. Whereas like the stars have to align perfectly, you have to work so hard to outplay her late game on a pick like Ezreal.
How much can we attribute FORG1VEN's massive advantage over Mouse to FORG1VEN? Because we were talking about it in laning phase, that he was drawing the attention of Clear Love down and it was forcing him into a 1v1.
I can see exactly where you're going. Unfortunately, almost nothing. I love it. I love the attempt, mainly because that 1v1 kill happened earlier. The thing is, I think even without FORG1VEN being in the bottom lane, putting any pressure, I think Clear Love would have had to have gone top anyway, considering how that top lane matchup went. I think, it's a nice kind of thought.
What's
Frost,
actually,
I'll let you take it.
No, what's actually really important, kind of like, going way back to the start of this game, is the 1v2 kills in the mid lane between Jankos and Ryu on Scout.
Yeah.
And why that's actually really important and how it snowballs into the top lane is that Scout, like the difference between Pawn and Scout is Scout will do what Clear Love won't. He'll gank top lane. He ganks top lane all the time, and if he's dead, because he's getting ganked and he's camped, it keeps him locked down. So the pressure that Jankos has been putting on the mid lane, has been putting on the top lane, I think is the primary factor of why this has snowballed so out of control, of like top side of the map for H2K, bottom side of the map pretty much even.
So looking at the item builds here, FORG1VEN has picked up the Phantom Dancer. So typically that's an item that you pick up as someone who's going to go into a side lane and 1v1 people.
Yep. So I had a conversation with Reckless about this exact thing about a month or so back during, I believe it was the regionals. He was saying that to him, one of the only useful third items you can have is Phantom Dancer. Normally it's a Zeal item, so static Rapid Fire or Phantom Dancer. We saw a lot of people picking up Rapid Fire Cannon for the longer range, but the dueling potential that you have from the damage reduction from Phantom Dancer after the nerfs to Rapid Fire and Static Shiv make it super viable if you're thinking somebody's going to get onto you like a Poppy or like an Ezreal, somebody that can kind of slow you, duel with you a little bit. So that's certainly the way he's going on that. Gives him the crit, gives him the damage, and gives him a little bit of survivability too.
How much is it about the survivability in this game? Because I can see like a Deft getting on top of Caitlyn, but Mouse is currently 0-2 and 0, and he's just a tank. So is it actually about that?
You've always got to worry about a TP flank, or if you make a mistake, like, not that FORG1VEN's playing to make a mistake, that's not really the point here,
Sure.
but there is the chance that somebody gets to him. So I think he knows there's enough wave clear, there's enough damage coming out from his team with how far ahead FORG1VEN is.
So it's a bit of a defensive item, but it's a FORG1VEN defensive item, so it's still going to deal some damage. I have a question about traps, because I always get triggered by like when traps are not in a perfectly straight line, but is there actually anything to perfectly spacing your traps, making sure people can't get through the gaps, and where you're wanting to place them and how you place them? Or is it if they're a jagged line, that's still fine?
I just draw pictures with mine.
What do you do with 5 dots, though?
Oh, I get creative.
So there are a couple of things that we'll see when we push up to an inhibitor tower. Maybe we have a moment to take a look, but the way that it curves on the platform, the way the steps go, if you line it up vaguely where the step blocks meet each other, just about you can perfectly cover that.
Oh.
And even if you don't perfectly cover that, unless you're playing in Challenger or Master or on like 8 ping, good luck trying to step through those. Like, in any other rank, they're never going to dodge it.
Oh, that bubble was used on the Malzahar ultimate as opposed to chaining the CC, which gave Jankos the flash to get out.
They did that earlier as well, but Ryu was super dead in the bottom lane, but I wasn't expecting it when in a situation like that where he wasn't completely dead.
So, Pulse, in your analytical opinion, the difference between dead and super dead, like, where are we?
I mean, like, he's going to 100% die. There's no way he's going to get out, and Jankos is at 90%.
Okay, so it's the difference between someone who's like for sure dead and someone who's like, you're probably in trouble, but...
Exactly.
Okay.
Dead and super dead.
Thank you for clarifying that.
The play-by-play's vocab dictionary right here.
Generally, to speak about traps, unless you're like super
Generally speak
sieging,
about traps?
when you're
I'm not
super
gonna take it there.
sieging, which is when you know you've got a tower, basically at all times try and hold on to a trap, unless you really need to use them in a defensive manner and put 5 down. So you'll see a lot of players put 4 across a lane. It just makes it awkward to walk through and makes fights very, very difficult to actually take in that area. They have a considerable amount of zone area around them as well. If you're kind of not paying attention in a fight, difficult to keep track of.
I have another question about traps. I know we're talking about traps a lot, but I think they're interesting. So the other day I was watching Prey, and he was placing down traps, and then the dude just got away from him because he was putting it against the wall. So how useful is putting down traps in like a 1v1? Because obviously like auto-attacking is a big part. Does putting down the trap take too much away from your DPS? How situational is it in those situations?
In a 1v1 scenario?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think you'll almost ever really set down a trap in a 1v1. It's
just
like
that they're running away.
Well, it's...
So there's a couple that you can set down. If it's a 1v1 and you're against a melee champion that has a gap close, you set the trap on your feet. You set it underneath
So that way,
you.
as the poppy comes by, pushes
get
you through,
trapped.
she triggers the trap.
So you trap net auto, and you get the double follow-up, and by that time your trap is available again, and you can stand and trade, and as long as their crowd control is gone, you can just stand and auto.
It's the same mentality back when Nidalee used to be played in like the mid lane, like throwing it way back. She would place the trap on her feet against an Akali. Akali would go in, trigger it, then try to shroud. You'd be like, ha-ha!
You've activated my trap card.
Speaking of trap cards,
This is not going well.
Yeah, but this is where Deft, this is the advantage of the Ezreal. We haven't spoken too much about it now. With the Iceborne Gauntlet build, he can kite very effectively in these fights, and that's why it's one of the most frustrating builds you'll ever play against, ever.
and what's super important, because he is able to kite and he is so safe and does so much poke damage, is it's really on Oda to be that flanking presence. Kennen has to get into those backlines and really lock that Ezreal down. And without like a TP flank or like a good Kennen ultimate, it's really hard for H2K to kind of merge onto these objectives. They are going to try to do the Baron, but this is still risky. Like, they're doing it because Clearleft's dead and there's no smite. But if EDG were more confident with their vision and were able to walk over to this objective, that's fish in a barrel.
And here's the effect of the traps. It forced Mouse and Scout down into H2K's own jungle, and now Ryu is able to just continually get on top of them. Deft, he's just taking damage. It's not going to kill him at any point, but H2K, just having that zone control makes it so tough for EDG to approach there.
I like how Mouse took the optimistic approach of going through the bush and hoping there wasn't a trap there. It was like, maybe there's not a trap in this bush because I can see everywhere else is. But yeah, this is Mako getting super dead.
So, super dead. Ryu's one of the only people really that can actually deal with Deft once the E is down. For Forgiven to do it, he has to close too much distance, whereas Ryu has enough tankiness, the ability to constantly root, constantly throw out the Q and actually get the damage down. But again, he has to put himself in the line of danger, and if Odo Amne is dead already, he's the next big focus. So H2K have to play that a little carefully.
That's the other really cool thing about Rise. I mean, since the changes to him, it's kind of adjusted, but typically when Rise was like super powerful, wow, super is the word of the cast. When Rise was very dominant throughout the meta, it canceled out a lot of AD carries with lower attack ranges, simply because, what is it, like a 600 cast range on his root, which is just absurd. Like, it is very hard for most AD carries to get within that distance to lay down their auto attacks, because otherwise Rise is like, hey, targetable root, you're dead.
Well, we have some calm before the storm, before H2K starts sieging. So we have a question from Twitter. Provisional OW says, why does Caitlyn always ult off cooldown? What is the benefit of doing that versus saving it for an execute? Very common question.
In this game, not a whole lot of use because you're against the sustain supports. They sustain it right back up. There are situations, though, where just chunking people down is very effective. One of the best uses of Caitlyn Ultimate is if you're playing against the LeBlanc.
I knew it was going to be LB.
Ultimate the LeBlanc, as soon as you see her at any point, and it instantly shuts down her ability to go aggressive with the distortion and try and poke.
You have to think of it as a targetable middle spear. It's about going to do that much damage to squishy targets. It's pretty absurd. It has a relatively low cooldown, and there's never really a point in a team fight where you're going to be like, hold on, guys.
Hold on.
Let me set up this shot.
This. Oh, mouse is in front of me.
Yeah.
And of course, there will be situations when having it as an execute would be more beneficial, but generally, if you're ulting as Caitlyn and they're not like 3 screens away and you're using like almost max range, standing there and auto-attacking has a higher damage output than using Q or ult if you're smart about it.
Yeah, what gets very frustrating, and kind of the difference between like good Caitlyns versus like great Caitlyns, is understanding like how oppressive your range is, and knowing exactly that pretty much the only time, especially late game, when you're going to be using your Q and you're going to be using your ult is when they actually are out of range. Right. There's never really ever going to be a reason when you're within auto attack range to switch it up and look for a Piltover Peacemaker, because it's not worth it at that point. So use them as chasing maneuvers.
Yeah, you always see those Caitlyn's who are like point blank range with someone and just pop their ultimate, and it's just like, I don't need to move anymore. Got some time to think about my next move.
That's how I got banned.
All right, so traps being set up here, and where's Deft? Oh, Deft with the team backing away. So H2K were trying the dragon there. 40 minutes into this game, and a 10k gold lead, so looking surprisingly good. We haven't really looked at the game too much because we've been focusing in and talking about other topics, but H2K have the lead here over EDG.
The lead, not to take away your thunder, I definitely think H2K are still in control of this game and have a much higher likelihood of winning this game, but that gold lead really doesn't mean anything at this point. Again, your gold lead is a race to a finish line. But at some point, like, it doesn't matter. You could have 100,000k gold, but everyone has their core items.
Starting to cap out.
Yeah, that's what you're trying to race towards. So everyone really has their core itemization. There is still an advantage to H2K, especially through Forgiven's items, whereas Deft is still looking for, I believe, a Blade of the Rune King will probably be his last item.
Likely. He's fairly low on any kind of lifesteal right now, which makes it difficult, which may be the reason why Forgiven is firing out the ultimate. The other person he's been targeting at is Scout, which, looking at it at first glance, you might say, okay, he's trying to proc the passive. The problem is for Malzahar, the passive comes up so frequently.
It's not like a bench
this late into the game. Yeah, exactly.
That word is banned. No more super.
Exceptionally fast.
There we go.
So it's not really that key item. We have seen an Ardent Sensor, though, come out on Vander on the support. So everything, just give Forgiven a little bit more. Give him that on hit. Give him give him everything.
That's the beauty about H2K's composition, is that they have so many great front lines in front of them, and they can control so much space through the Ken and through the Rise, that if they play kind of like a line of scrimmages set by your tank line, and what I like to call a front-to-back composition, where they don't need to rely on flanking plays, that it's just running down the enemy opponent, Forgiven's just going to shine there. Like, Caitlyn's going to be able to outrange pretty much every champion and just mow through people.
Forgiven's the AD carry, but Ryu's got a Mercurial Scimitar. Yeah. Yeah, that's just because he wanted his QSS to go into something. Rise, this is going to sound really dumb, but I'll give you some context.
Oh, I'm excited
Exile,
now.
I'm ready.
Exile, when we were looking at his Rise in solo queue, was doing a really dumb build where he went double tier item, building both the Mana Mune, and, this isn't really empowering his tower pushing potential that much, but again, it's just like, well, I guess you mix a couple of autos in.
Every
and
little counts stress.
QSS doesn't build into anything else, so
Why not?
Scimitar.
Yeah, what else are you going to put in?
Exactly.
His items are full.
Yeah, he needs it because of the Malzahar, so he's just like, well, I'll just get that.
The only thing that I would actually change up for H2K is I think that they should have more blue trinkets, in all honesty. Like, I understand having the sweeper trinket on Rise because he's at this point where if you do face check into him, you know, he's able to clear out that vision. He can stand in a bush. He can wait for someone to come around a corner unsuspectingly because he has that hard CC. But at this late in the game, I say it all the time, I think it's so much more important to at least have 2 blue trinkets because setting up vision on an Elder Drake, on a Baron, it can pretty much make or break your game.
Ooh, this is an interesting trade. Elder Drake and H2K have the top side of the map, but they can't really collapse down fast enough. Now they know it is, but Rek'Sai ultimate is not available. They're trying to get in. With Ryze is bringing them with the ultimate down as well, so H2K are looking to fight here. Elder's going to go.
Oh, Uruwame.
They're trying to lock him down through it.
That's
But
coming
look
in
at
there
the
as well.
Caitlyn
Oh,
damage.
Deft.
It's through the GA.
Oh, he stole it! Jankos!
Jankos with the steal. They're still trying to cut around here as well. Forgiven. Oh, it's
oh,
Forgiven
wow.
unleashed. He's coming in. Trying to get his auto attacks down. Look at that Makiro Scimitar paying dividends. And Forgiven just completely untouched. Like he's full health coming out at the end of that fight as well.
Depending on how quickly they can push through these creep waves, that might be game. There are 40-second death timers, but there's so many healthy members from H2K. Odoamne will be up before any of EDG respawns, so he'll have that teleport available. There's a big wave in the top lane. I think this is at least Inhibitor, possibly a Nexus Tower, or even the game, depending on how H2K play this.
H2K right now should, at a minimum, go Inhibitor, then Baron, at a minimum, as you're talking about. The fact that Scout is the one that is alive makes this a little more difficult because he has decent AoE. 20 seconds really on Deft, that's who they're looking for. But look, no, this push, they've killed Scout. That's going to be it.
This is game.
That's it. Yeah. If Scout had been able to stay alive there, they would have been okay. But
yeah.
H2K with a big win over EDG.
Wow, H2K coming in here, and it turns out that they finally did pick up the game, even with that goal lead as well. Europe, we're coming back, boys.
Coming back. We picked the AD carry matchup. Forgiven output the damage in the end of the game.
Yeah, that's very true. I was going to ask a question as well in terms of item builds. When do you actually want to swap out your boots as well? Because sometimes we see super late game, it's just like, we're going to pick up another item.
At this point,
it's really dependent on what you're facing across from on the enemy team and kind of like the composition and how you execute it. It's never going to be like a hard and fast rule when you sell your boots, but like if you have so much control in front of you, if you have multiple GAs, if you got I always want to call it the bell.
The bell.
The support Q. There you go. The support QSS. The Mikhails. Then obviously you have a lot of safety where you don't necessarily need your boots. But if you're against someone who's diving the back line constantly, then you probably want to hang on to those Pumas.
I'm probably going to call it the bell for the rest of the time now. But talking about like this matchup as well, like H2K, 2 wins as well. Forgiven. Do you think he'll be more, I would say, like instrumental in like the future games that we see from H2K? Because it was a lot of this was like the knock-on effects, and then top lane and mid lane, of course.
I mean, it's a weird one because neither AD carry had a massive effect individually on this game.
Just kind of did the jobs.
I think Forgiven is going to be more instrumental perhaps in the later game, but I look at the way that Deft like tried in this game, but he had so much to do with not a whole lot to do it with at the end. Like he farmed fairly well, but didn't really get too much further ahead than Forgiven. And actually Forgiven at the end of the game nearly Flame Horizoned him. I'm looking at it and Forgiven has like 90
It was close.
CS over him.
I mean, ultimately, well, like I agree with like the logic behind it. Like it wasn't necessarily like Forgiven and Vander who like snowballed and started that game going. I definitely think that like H2K like collectively just executed on their game plan better. You know, like let's get Forgiven on the Caitlyn. Let's prioritize taking the Karma as well as like narrowing that support champion pool, and let's make sure that we constantly have like this superior pressure point that we're going to just straight up win the bottom side of the map, and that allow Jankos to pivot. You know, have like the option play available. Like I'm going to fight Clear Love. I'm going to go top. I'll go bottom and do the 3v3 because we'll be able to track him because we have this pressure point. So like ultimately, no, it wasn't Forgiven that had the snowball, but he was a fundamental part of the success that H2K did to execute their victory there.
And to take maybe a step back and look at the EDG on a bigger picture from this game, this is a very different looking EDG to the one we saw earlier today. Without the Tahm Kench, without the Rek'Sai, looks a little less clean, a little less crisp, unable to execute quite as effectively on some of their dives and plays. So I think that's such a big part, is banning that away.
I mean, ultimately, I can go on at length about Rapid Star, EDG's drafting coach, and kind of EDG's drafts. If there's another weakness, they've been very questionable over kind of the last 2 splits in their draft, especially for big games like this. I think it's just kind of like almost blatant disrespect to allow FORG1VEN to have his Caitlyn. I mean, maybe in the back room they're saying he's going to take the Caitlyn. We know for sure it is FORG1VEN. We have something, you know, the Nami and the Ezreal that just can absorb the pressure. But ultimately, H2K got exactly what they wanted.
And I think we did too. Another win in the books for H2K, but that's enough from us for now. When we return, I'll be joined by Azael and Zig as we return to the top lane for Yang's battle with H2K's top laner, Ziv. However, in the meantime, we'll be sending you back to the mainstream where Dash and the rest of the analyst desk are breaking down this win by H2K.
So far today.
And the only team they have to play left is INTZ. So we're realistically looking at H2K being the first seed out of this groups right now.
Yeah, very much so. Of course, you mentioned that there might be some blame to go to EDG. You know, with that early game, of course, we saw a very strange early kill going to the top lane for FORG1VEN, which really I mean, that opened that lane up. And if we are going to throw criticisms toward EDG, it's for things like that because they're not giving themselves the opportunity, you know, to get to that mid game at an even point.
Yeah, this is the second game they've picked the Ezreal Nami bottom lane. It's the second game both of their solo lanes then decided to lose by a huge margin. And Mouse, I have to say he decided to do that because he was in a bad situation and he completely got solo killed. And then ClearLove, especially later in the game, made some boneheaded Baron decisions when trying to two-man gank a Kennen while the rest of the team could just move up towards Baron. It was, in some ways, H2K's macro was gifted to them by ClearLove's poor decisions.
Really, in this game here, Mouse played worse than we could even expect. Like, if you play Poppy into Kennen, don't push the lane, because there's nothing for you up there. You're just going to get traded, you're going to get run down, and you're going to die. So that was terrible. ClearLove, you said this earlier, Clement, that he wasn't playing good enough, and you actually highlighted how he was a weakness. Again, he's not doing anything in these games here, and especially in the late game, in teamfights on this Elise, he's one of the guys who steps too far forward. You know, he gets caught out quite a few times with that. He doesn't have the impact we expect from a guy that we personally put as the best jungler in the world coming into this tournament. And that is just not good enough. So EDG definitely has some players who need to step up for him to do better. I still think Deft and Mako are fantastic in the bottom lane, but some of these guys on the top side, they need to be much, much better.
And we're talking about continuing to hammer this point for H2K, transitioning strong lanes into strong late game. Let's go ahead and take a look at some team fights that happen throughout the game. First is an Acer replay, the fight where H2K seized control of this game.
And I like this. When you don't have hard engage in your comp, you need like creative ways to start it. And that's like a Ryze TPing in. And at first it looks really good here, but then it's actually Kennen flying in, and the Karma gets knocked away, so there's no shielding now for Kennen. So once he gets CC'd, he does get taken out, but then look at ClearLove. Ryu hides behind the corner, so there's no vision. ClearLove walks in, gets CC'd, goes down, and this actually gives H2K the Baron.
Yeah, it gives them permission to take the Baron because without that opportunity for a Smite Steal on the other side, they play this correctly here in order to pick up this Baron once they roll it through here.
And they know they can finish it. Obviously, there's no jungler. And honestly, this was all Ryu getting the kill on ClearLove. Hiding behind the corner out of vision, get the 2-second snare, and now they understand we need to finish it. No Karma to steal it.
Yeah, and you were just saying finish this, finish this, finish this. And to their credit, they actually did maintain damage on it. A fairly easy peel off afterwards as well because they did have the Karma to speed the team up. And this was really the swinging point where they got a huge lead in the game.
I think further down the line, teams are going to be looking to ban out Ryu's Ryze because it's been a monster right now. You win the lane against Westdoor, it's like, okay, it's Westdoor. But you win the game against Scout that convincingly against a counter pick, that really spells a lot of trouble going down further in the tournament for INTZ. So I don't think any Ryze for Ryu anymore.
Absolutely. And of course, EDG still made plenty of good moves to attempt to get back into the game. We had seen some, good Malzahar play around the lack of QSS for Ryu at one point. And then, of course, they make the stab at the Elder Drake. And that's going to be our final replay here. But a big steal coming out from Jankos and a 4-for-1 in favor of H2K to close out the game.
And this was a little scary because I think H2K should have engaged this fight about a second earlier so that the Elder Drake wouldn't have actually had a chance to be taken. ClearLove stays on it, and finally Ryu and Jankos make it in the back. Instant flash smite. ClearLove isn't able to secure it despite having the execute damage on the Elise.
Yeah, Mouse actually did the only good thing he did all game long in this one fight, where he did manage to knock both Jankos and Ryu away from the fight, so it looked pretty bad for H2K. But as soon as they made it back in, and of course with the steal, able to clean the fight. So that was a good Poppy ulti. Sadly for them, losing the Elder Drake, that means you give over the buff. 4 Drakes, I think it was already to H2K, so that's a massive buff they're gonna get from that one. And they used it to win the game, and they fully deserve to win this. And I'm so happy to see H2K play much, much better in the late game and actually utilizing having such a good early game and then transition it to winning games.
Yeah, a player of the game going to Ottawamne here, picking up solo kills in lane. Of course, maybe the first one slightly gifted to him from Mouse, but then we saw a lot of attention driven up there, making sure to keep Mouse down. A pretty large CS lead built throughout the game. And on that cannon, he's managing to make some good team fight flanks happen.
Yeah, he made some, obviously the first kill in the game was huge for swinging that lane. 50+ CS advantage on Mouse. So it's not just Mouse sucking when you're down that much CS. The other guy has to be punishing him extremely heavily. And then he was drawing so much attention, you can make the argument that ClearLove went down because he had to stop him, and that's what started H2K to get that first Baron.
All right, so now, of course, looking ahead just slightly, nothing is determined in this group with that win. Technically, every team is still alive. We'll see moving forward how INTZ plays out against AHQ and EDG, but with a seat in the quarterfinals still up in the air, the next match between INTZ versus AHQ, you can't miss it, rather. We're back in just 3.5.
He's Edward in Edward game.
Wait, he's the one from the party.
He's rich?
Yes, he is Edward.
Oh my god.
You show him how you do it in Poland.
Quick flash burn. It's going to be followed by Jankos. Ryu. No, he goes deep. He got his first blood. Oh, is he going to go down? He is. That's a trade.
And right now, it's up to ClearLove.
Oh, no. A one-on-one. Woo! He's asserting his dominance early this game.
Misses here. That could be a follow-up. Ryu.
Flash. There's a portal. They're going to go right on towards him for the dive. And Mouse is not getting out of this one alive. But Jankos is going in. They've locked up Mouse. They're going to take him down. They just need a bit more damage. FORG1VEN finishes the job. Jankos a little low, but they finished off Scout. Vander a little bit too low in this one. It is just a 1-for-1. The steal away. Jankos secures a absolutely massive Elder Drake.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
H2K, they beat AHQ. They beat EDG. These guys are red hot.